Good afternoon and welcome, Dr. Guyo. To start us off, do you mind, explaining to the viewers who you are, what do you do, your line of training as well?
Okay, thank you very much, Abdullahi, for having me today. My name is Guyo Roba. I come from Marsabit. I'm a pastoralist from Northern Kenya. Yes, in terms of educational preparedness, I studied undergraduate. I did my study in environmental science, basically looking at planning and management. And then I specialized in my master's in energy, policy and economics. Then I came back in UK, that's where I did my master's. And I came back to Kenya and I pursued a career in public policy studies and analysis as a young professional and also as a policy analyst at KIPRA. KIPRA is a public policy institute for, KIPRA is Kenya Institute for Public Policy Research and Analysis. And I was working mainly on energy, environment, transport, and other what they call productive sector. And then I moved from there. I joined IUCN as a program officer with the dryland program. IUCN is one of the global conservation organization. So I worked a lot in the dryland. I actually tactfully shifted my interest towards where my heart lies. I moved towards dryland program, where a lot of pastoral work around land tenure, rangeland management, pastoral voices, and etc. I actually discussed and pushed forward. So I worked there as a program officer and also as a senior program officer in Eastern Southern Africa. And I had a good opportunity to interact with pastoralists across in Sahel, in Horn of Africa, and also in Eastern Africa. And I deepened my interest and also my knowledge in a number of communities that transcend these dryland boundaries in different countries within IGAD region. So while I was actually a senior program officer at IUCN, I got opportunity by chance. I saw an advert for a PhD opportunity to be taken up in Germany at the University of Kassel. And I gave it a try, went through the process, and I got an opportunity to do a PhD in basically in a subject which is close to my heart, but not very much centered on my background, which is livestock marketing. So I was looking at the value chain from Northern Kenya for almost a longer period. My fieldwork was around 14 months. It's so much embedded within the subject. I studied the dynamics, the conduct of the market, and I looked at mainly the governance of the chain, basically colonial, post-colonial transition of the chain, why a pastoralist is still not in the position for better bargain, why they're not producing for the market, why is this narrative that they are not market-oriented still persisting. So it's a very interesting area of study, and I got so much into the subject. And I finished my PhD in 2017 with a number of publications on livestock marketing within Kenya. And then I rejoined IUCN again in the Global Drylands Initiative in a split position based here and also in Cologne, in Switzerland.
Thank you, Guyo. So I mean, in that regard, then, thank you for that insight. One of the overarching assumptions when discussing pastoralism is that it doesn't contribute to the GDP. But, the examination of empirical evidence suggests otherwise. Pastoralists contribute anywhere between, 12 to even in some instances higher than 12% to the GDP. And, over 75% of cattle herds in Kenya are kept in pastoralist area. Why do you think this notion persists that pastoralists are actually a drain to the country's economy, when in reality that they are contributing far more than it's acknowledged?
Okay, thank you. That's a very interesting question. I think it's very important to understand the history behind why the narrative. And I think this history is very common in the old literature and also current literature. In the 80s and 70s, I think up to some point in the early 90s, all the dryland areas of Kenya are legally classified as wasteland. What that implies is that anything you do in that area adds value more than what people are doing there. So you can imagine if that's the version, the mindset of the planners, then nobody will invest too much in the data. So we have a persistent, inaccurate, gap, a lot of issues within the data. And even the number you are quoting actually comes from a very old literature in early 90s, mid 90s. Nobody has ever invested in livestock census. What is the marketed value? What is unmarketed value? What are all these things? What is the total economic value of livestock within the dryland area? That's a very good starting point. Then from there, what is the offtake to understand the contributions to the market? And a lot of data is very shaky. So many government through project, which is very short-termist, invest in data collection, setting up platform for plugging in the numbers of animals sold. But then when you actually try to pull data from there, up to now, there's a lot of inconsistency. So none of the counties actually, even after the establishment of the county, it's baffling that these things have never been considered serious, that if you cannot count, you can't manage, you can't plan. So that simple fact is not actually sinking in very well. So partly the data gap came from that historical narrative of how drylands are classified, how people are classified, and its contribution. What is the space of these people in the policy? What is the space of these people in investments, livestock investment, market investment, all the corridor of investment you can think about? That is partly corrected, but not still, we are very far from there. Then the second part is dryland areas actually is a multifunctional landscape. You cannot measure an acre of dryland versus an acre of a land in Limuru or somewhere in highlands of Kenya. That is why historically, I think when you remember your geography or I think agriculture, these areas are called low potential area. So it's already pregnant with a bit of notion that this area, how much you can put in, is an input-output system. So for every input you get, they're trying to measure against an input into the land, which is a bit wrong. So dryland being a multifunctional landscape, the totality of the things that you do within the dryland area. I could give you an example. Livestock is one of them. Potential for carbon sequestration is another one. The wildlife within that is all, not well structured in terms of when we compute the data. So the total economic value of this area is lost within all this narrative of, we have tourism potential, but that tourism potential is within the dryland area where people are using that land with the same wildlife, the mega charismatic flora and fauna that actually bring a lot of money to this country. So I think if you want to work around that, definitely we have to look at the frame of the frame for valuation. And that takes a bit of time. How do we compete? How do we plug in back to our national data, contribution to agricultural GDP, and contribution to overall GDP? Actually, livestock in Kenya to date is considered to contribute 35% of agricultural GDP and around 12%, 10-12%, depending on which data you read. So you can see these are all factors that have caused that inconsistency and also data gap. And up to now, that informs the planning, how much you put in. You'll be shocked if you look at Marsabit County or any other county, look at amount of money allocated for irrigation versus allocated for livestock marketing and value within livestock. It's shocking up to now. The same narrative has persisted, and all the things that we say is wrong is still used in budgeting, in decision making, in planning. And I think there's a point where one has to stop and say, where did you go wrong, and how do we actually correct this anomaly? Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Guyo.
You're welcome.
The other question, which is slightly related to that, is despite these regions, contribution to the local GDP as well as the national GDP, there is persistent poverty. I mean, like you mentioned, why most of it persists, because we have got faulty data. Data means data that are used for planning, and then the outcome doesn't translate in improving people's lives. So what then, role do the county government has, starting from, ensuring that you have very good data upon which you manage your planning in terms of addressing not just the poverty that we witness in this region, but also an improvement in, how the national government possibly sees this.
Okay, thank you so much. I think when I finished my last part of the question, in my answer, I said there's need for change of heart, actually, what the Romans call conversatio morum. Basically, we need to change our heart in terms of how do we think, what are the potential within our area? And I think that potential, if you want to link it to your question around how do we actually address some of these perverse, poverty, etc. So we need to, at two levels, actually, we always need to think at two levels. One is at the production level. what is our production environment looking like? What are the emergent issues that actually hinder us not to produce for the market that we want? There are a number of emerging issues. There are climate change, there are historical issues around that. So I think if I were in the government planning, county government planning department, then I'll look at livestock at with different lens. So what that implies is that I have to start characterizing my production investment differently. And there are three main areas that one can actually, really like to boost, production and produce animals with good body condition, good body conformity to actually align it to the market. At the moment, if you go to Marsabit, let's say just a quick example, and you jump on a truck that is carrying goats from Marsabit to Nairobi, you find all sorts of goats in one truck. And they do that because it's purely aging mechanism. You have to hedge yourself because you don't know which animal is required. So, amassing the goats required for a truck takes 2 weeks. So information that a trader or any entrepreneur is using to bring animals to Nairobi is 2 weeks old information. So with that, what it means is that by the time you reach here, the market wants sheep.
Something different.
And you have only 10 sheep in the truck. So you run back and bring sheep. So by that, what it means is that we need to clean a number of things. And I would start with the production side. The production side, I think, one of the persistence constraints within the production is the production infrastructure. And that is, rangeland, fodder, condition of fodder, mobility, water infrastructure, access, and many things. And these are a bundle of things that you can say, for me to rework investment and production, these are the areas that I should be targeting, rangeland governance, mobility, how do we actually cross-use a landscape in season that, like this right now, is very dry season. But then we look at the world of Marsabit, there are many areas with mismatch between water and pasture. You have pasture in a certain area, but then there's no water. The water is finished before you finish the pasture. So you'll have a standing pasture over the years. So we need to look at our planning aspect and how do we correct this mismatch between pasture and water so that we can holistically use our landscape. That's one. Number two, I think, is diseases, animal diseases. Because an area, most pastoral areas are cross-boundary areas. It could be to Somalia, to Sudan, to Uganda, to South Sudan, to Ethiopia. So there's a lot of challenges around cross-boundary diseases and also in-country diseases. We need to look at this as a very serious issue. Right now, I think the ratio of a vet doctor to per capita, it's actually below the international required. And we're not working very hard to bridge that gap in terms of how do we actually make sure that people who need services get it. When you have 4 vet doctors for 70,000 kilometers square area like Marsabit, then it tells you a lot that you need to work on this aspect. So disease control, there are 3 aspects about disease control one has to work on. One is you need to have a serious contingency plan. A contingency plan to avoid any crisis, sanitary crisis or any kind of crisis, should be always up to speed and should be very good. Number 2 is we need to have what they call a disease contingency fund. Most of the time, when you report a disease, it takes average a month or 2 between the response and the time when it is addressed. So that turnaround, you can only be very creative and establish something called disease contingency fund that has a minimum requirement in terms of unlocking. You have to find a standing fund that can be unlocked. Maybe it could be based with the Directorate of Veterinary Services in Nairobi, wherever it is, but make sure that you have a standing fund for the ASAL counties so that you can easily respond to emergencies before the animal deaths occur, the spread is beyond the control, etc. So this is one aspect. The other one, which I alluded to, is the quality of manpower to address this issue. I think we have a contradictory bill. According to the veterinary service, you have to be a trained surgeon, vet surgeon, to address all the health issues. But we're not working very hard to make sure that anybody who addresses this issue can be. So what happened, what I think the county government could have done is to start, I would actually say, a scholarship to train diploma courses like in Haiti, Animal Health Institute in Kabete and many others. So if you do 200-300 as a bridge, then you can easily, issues of, reporting and etc. And then lastly, I think you should work also on your reporting mechanism. Surveillance and reporting is a big issue. None of the hard livestock keepers have even a kit for animal welfare.
Right.
In many countries, people have kit for animal welfare. In Pakistan,
Right.
reporting system is real-time, smart reporting system, and all these things. So that is at that level. So the production has three aspects. One is the infrastructure aspect I mentioned. The other one is animal health. And the third, I think, which I think increasingly has been overlooked, is the breed improvement.
Right.
We don't need to change the breed, but we can look at our breed because of inbreeding and etc. The yield of the animal body frame, conformity to the market has been going down. So I think for me, that is a very important investment in the production.
Right.
And then we need bundle of investment again to follow up in marketing. The marketing, I think, is basically, value chain issue. How do you, because we're dealing with fragmented production and marketing system.
Right.
So as I told you, an example of how a truck is carrying all sorts of animal, we need to fix the downstream and the upstream of the chain.
Yeah.
So that when I'm living with my animal from Marsabit, I have some level of reliability to who is buying the animal, at what price. And this could be done in many ways. One could do, a mega dashboard that identifies the buyers, their demand.
They do it for crops.
Supply.
They do it for ndizi, they do it for nyanya na kitunguu, it.
Yes.
And, with technology and, SMS, you can easily, some of these things are not hard to do. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can imagine if you improve some level of transparency on how animals are supplied, conditioned, then you actually teach people what to produce for the market. Right now, if you ask my mother, what kind of animal do you identify from your herd to sell? She's tell you, actually, she told me once that it depends with size of my problem.
Right.
If my problem is household items, I'll just sell one of them. If my problem is a school fee, I sell a group of them together. So you can imagine, it's not that they're not market oriented. It's just that the market is not oriented to them.
Towards them.
You see? So that orientation of market require a number of investment. One is this dashboard for ICT. Investment where you can put a number of things. Actually, you can do a versatile platform that give market information, disease information, financing options for whoever wants to go into investment. There are many ways you can do that. And by doing that, I think we'll move them slowly from the spot market. Right now, the spot market, all the assessment of animals is eyeball assessment. If you go to Kariobangi market, yes, you push the goat ahead, and you just look at the body conformity, you count the number of teeth, you do so many things to assess whether this animal is old or young. So we should move from that eyeball assessment to actually body condition of animals give you more premium. So then from there, if you do that, in future, who knows, actually, we can go into the sort of organic chain where we actually produce a premium animal. You could always call it happy goat, like in the rangeland, this is an animal which has been born in the rangeland area.
It's free range.
Free range. It has eaten a number
of hormones have been
herbs.
injected into their bodies.
You see? Yeah. So that space for premium pricing is not there right now because the traceability system is a problem. And we need to work on the traceability if you want to go into that space. It's a niche market, which I think many conscious middle class consumers are going into. People want to know what kind of animals they're eating.
Where do they
I think
come
the future
from?
belongs to that. Where do they come from? And there's that obligation of people to give back to a system that corresponds to your consciousness, values, and etc. So I think that we are missing big time because we've always worked from the colonial time when the market was, we used to have three systems actually. There's auction organized marketing in the colonial time, purely for tax collection, not for giving you more value for the animal. Then from there, we experimented with liberalization. We say the price will set itself, the market will demand what it wants. Then there's a problem because that opens a space for people who are connected to the urban space with those who are not connected to the urban space. When a producer is not connected to urban space, they produce animals for future market, which is very uncertain. And that uncertainty will never move from there. And that is why we are always, tagged to Nairobi. There's no reason why we should be. If you didn't invest in our cold chain, if we invest in cold chain today, we are not investing because you see with carcass, you carry more animals than live animal. The post-harvest losses are less because right now, a seller or anybody bringing animal from Nairobi, Marsabit to Nairobi, or Wajir to Nairobi, has a number of losses. There's something called even physical losses, animal disappearing while it's walking away.
Some dying,
some dying on the way. They die on the way, they physically disappear. You go into bad debt, somebody takes on credit and then they don't pay you. The animal condition also depreciate because this environment is very cold. So they have a shelf life actually in cold. They have a shelf life where if somebody is not actually mitigating the loss, every day you keep in Nairobi,
it's a loss.
Has a cost, is a loss because you pay harder, you pay sleeping place, you pay for fodder, all these things. So when you bring them together, people dispose them.
Yeah, because you are desperate. Because you are desperate. You've incurred all that losses. Let's say, for instance, you've borrowed money from the bank. You're paying for the car. You're paying for the people who are lifting the cars when they fall. In Nairobi, there are different costs. And ultimately, you bring, let's say, a goat that is 50, 60 kilos, right? Enough of it is lost. And the guy at the end of the chain gets more money per kilo from your goat without incurring all the costs that you've incurred.
Correct. Yes. Very true. So I think that is one part. There is also the sticky pricing.
Yes.
You always see the price of meat going up, but then the price of the animal don't go up. And that is sticky prices exist because of the information asymmetry within the market. Right now, we deal with what they call faceless buyers. Nobody knows the nature of the buyers, what they want, where the big goats go. So people who are connected to this space in Kariobangi market actually exploit this space. So as soon as your animal reaches Kariobangi, you have lost all the bargain. Every kilometer you're losing bargain from Wajir or from Marsabit to Nairobi. So I think in nutshell, this has to be cleaned. And one way of cleaning is actually basically to invest in ICT, ICT for market, dashboard, trying to establish a multi-stakeholder platform where people meet actually discuss this issue and hopefully strike a bilateral contracts on animals they want. And I think, so something like that could also be done. So we need to do a lot of experimentation, a lot of thinking to clean the mess within the chain. Right now, it's very difficult to make money. That is why a trader who is investing in livestock, whether cattle or goats, for the last 20 years might have even just owned a motorbike in his entire life. Then he goes back to bicycle. He never built a house because of that zigzag profit. Like in 2 trips, you make a profit and then you make a deep loss. So you are back to the same position in the first start. So if you draw that graph, it looks like this electricity curve with a sharp spikes and etc. So if you try to normalize the profit, then in a year, they might not even make any profit per head of animal. And the input cost, the cost of transportation, on average, from Marsabit to Nairobi, you need to pay total of cost, 65,000 shilling for a truck. And you need to recoup that cost plus make some profit. So you can imagine how all the uncertainty building up.
It is. Yes. So I just want us to shift gears a little bit. You touched a bit on it, the use of technology. You touched on it as far as disease surveillance goes, as far as pasture and water goes. How then can, pastoral communities that have, very innovatively used the rangeland with all its harsh reality, natural and man-made, how can we incorporate, parts of it, as well as, information technology for the pastoralists to be able to get not just at the chain end of marketing, but also broadly speaking, to benefit from livestock keeping, which is an incredibly labor-intensive affair.
Okay, I think I hope I got your question right. I think what happens, is a little bit of context just to help you. Is that over the years, I think this rangeland have been managed by a system. In the Borana area, in Borana community, we call it EDA system. Actually, EDA is the highest geographical unit for resource management. From EDA, it's a hierarchy, it's like a funnel. So from EDA, you have rare, you have cluster of villages which form that rare, and then you have the village, which is the smallest unit of management. So EDA, with its elders, are the ones which actually give, right to water, the type of right they give, whether it's a transit right, whether it's a temporary right, whether it's an ownership right, all sorts of rights are embedded within these institutions. And unfortunately, over the years, this institution has been weakened. Systematically has been weakened, and we have created new ones called committees, water users association, ranger users association, all the sort of associations that are legally on paper.
Right.
So the ones which are legally on paper are actually registered by people who don't even own livestock sometimes. So you can imagine the one with existence on the ground, which is the either, for example, have no legitimacy to run things. The one with the legitimacy have no existence on the ground. So this is what we call open access governance gap. Then it becomes an open access abuse. Actually, it's a governance gap that leads to an open access abuse, and it actually breeds conflict. It breeds all sort of mess when you're managing your landscape. So I think back to technology, definitely there are two ways of recovering this. One is to integrate and form a hybrid institution within the same committee system. Bring the elders with legitimacy, with existence on the ground, an institution with legitimacy on the paper to work together. And one way of doing that is to document these traditional rules and regulation and create a bylaw through the county assembly that can be used. You remember it's called county council bylaws.
Yes.
You cut a tree and you get arrested at a certain bylaw within the county council when it is a trust land.
Yes.
So the same thing could be experimented where we can actually basically give those elders legitimacy that they already had in a legal system.
Right.
So you create a bylaw, pass through the county assembly with very well structured, the rules, regulation, what will happen to you when you break a rules, right. What kind of, fee or compensation that is attached to if you don't clean after your animal, what will happen? If you access a wet season grazing area,
right.
When it is a dry season, right. What will happen to you? All these things.
Right.
And then if you do that, then that's the first part of the process.
Right.
And then you can bring technology now. This is where the technology fits very well. Although we say certain areas are wet season grazing area, others are dry season grazing area, it's very hard to understand without the map right now.
Right.
So when you create a bylaw,
right.
This map, when it is digitized,
right.
From the hardest mental map,
right.
to a digital
on
map, then it becomes on a paper, then it becomes a very important. So when I say you're not supposed to be in wet season grazing area,
yes.
somebody can say, this is something communities can agree and say, wet season is start from here, right. From this micro landscape to another macro landscape,
right.
And then the dry areas are these. Right. Once you agree, these technologies could fit together. Once you do a very good GIS map, Google Maps, and facilitate communities to do a participatory demarcation, right. Then you have two sets of document. One is the bylaw that we establish, hopefully through the county assembly, and then the second is the map. So this map has other relevance also. You can create water infrastructure map within this. Right now, the biggest mess is that we create a lot of water points, mostly driven by contracts, people who come from Nairobi looking for the chief. They drill a borehole, they do a pond, they do a dam, and then they disappear. These open water points, in Isiolo alone, one time when we did the assessment, we have over 270 open water points. None of them have proper management.
Clearly marked.
Access. How do you control people from accessing them in certain season? Right. How do you stop long-term settlement around this water point? This is not figured out. And this is actually what community call killing the rangeland.
Right.
So many of them require to be decommissioned.
Right.
So for you to do that, you have to digitize all the water points and do a very nice inventory and ask communities which water point need to be decommissioned, which one need to be expanded, so that you have a better control of who access and for how long. Certain areas you don't need to stay more than 2-3 months.
Right.
Where there's ephemeral species of grasses that are very fast growing. Right. If you don't eat them, it's blown away by the wind. So these are areas, what you call kuro, like salty plants. Right. All these things have really good value in terms of bringing the value of animal, flavor of the meat, and etc.
Right.
So this map has also that part where you can actually embed water maps within it to plan the water infrastructure, what need to be added, what need to be decommissioned, where's the mismatch between water and pasture, which I earlier mentioned.
Right.
These now translate into a very good tool for planning, a tool for management. So when we move into another step in our marketing to do traceability system, this map still becomes very handy.
Exactly.
That this animal originates from here, just graze in this landscape for this period of time under this condition. So our traceability has a document that actually help us to trace back the foot of animals, where they come from, what they pass through, and the animal welfare and etc. Everything has to be done. If you want to access international market, if you want to, let's say, access European Union market,
Right.
with your goat flavored, whatever, salty
Right.
flavored goats.
Right.
So I think that is, for me, the closest one can integrate these technologies to make sure that that happens. And then I think the other part is you can also look at historically the shift within the rangeland.
Yes.
In terms of the value of the pasture,
yeah,
the shift in vegetation, and which areas are degraded, what kind of restoration measures are required. Right now, we're doing broadcasting of seeds in any open places. and they say it's not successful because it's not successful because it requires care, it requires to be managed, it requires settlement around there, it should serve certain purpose, like home herd or these small herds that you have around home.
Yeah.
This is area where you can say, this is where we have land degradation.
Right.
And then you can have your plan for restoration.
Right.
So in one fold, this technology, application of technology can give you so many benefits, as I explained to you.
Right,
from
thank
marketing,
you.
land restoration, everything, disease surveillance, everything. So combined into one, I think is a perfect tool, which is currently lacking.
You mentioned something, we'll wrap it up with this. You mentioned something very important there, export. It's not just a question of just looking at domestic market, which is very important, of course, but also export market. And there are other countries that have done, or they are doing very well. Case in point is Namibia, that had an access to the US, which is a big market. And then Botswana also doing very well. What could therefore then, at both the county level and the national level, these counties could do to increase that? Part of it, some of it you've touched on it, but what can we, at a very macro level, be able to do that to be able to access? I understand that, access to this market is not just something that you can do at the drop of a hat. It takes time. It takes a lot of work. There are also a lot of quality control. So, for the viewers, what should be done?
Okay, I think the countries which you gave example, it's very important to understand that this is very much ranch-based countries.
Right.
So the production system slightly differs from the pastoral production system.
Right.
But I think there's a success level from these countries where I think they have worked from the organized ranching system to access this market. I think like in Botswana, I think through the Botswana Meat Commission, which is sort of a monopoly similar to Kenya Meat Commission, they managed to have a consistent dialogue with people, with the off-takers, with the producers, and all these people to actually get the free or tariff-free access to European Union market under that arrangement. And I think they have done that partly because I think 50% of the land within Namibia, and I think partly also maybe Botswana, is held under different kind of land tenure under these big ranches, which is very organized, with all the systems that come with the investment as a business. So that doesn't mean that you can't do that. What it means is that there are many lessons I think we could pick from the Botswana. If you just as a starting point, when government is in this business the same way as the monopoly of Botswana Meat Commission, we have Kenya Meat Commission that has actually failed the producers and also failed the traders big time. So what happened is that what they did in those countries is to work on this, what I initially called traceability system, where animals that are produced within certain system are linked to the ranchers. Ranchers actually do part of the fattening, part of the disease, basically what we call sanitization, for them to access this quota within the European Union. And I think one of the things that is transferable, I think that has been done, is once they started this bilateral relationship with the export market, they made sure that their market, because when an animal leaves a market like Kenya, it doesn't, if I sell an animal that is not meeting international standard, when a meat goes or animal goes from here, it goes as a Kenyan animal or Kenyan meat. It's no longer an individual thing. So the cost of one individual could be very costly for all the people who are targeting the export market. Right. So I think what they have jealously guarded is making sure that you meet this international standard. And I think there are a few examples where they also did something very exciting in Botswana. There's something they call the feedlotters advance scheme. This is where they give loans to feedlot feedlots to buy animals from pastoralists, fatten them, and deliver them to the abattoir after 40 to 90 days. That includes also the period when, when you do a bit of disease control, make sure the animals is in right quality, right body conformity, body condition. And we used to have what they called, in Kenya, we call it what, disease-free zone.
Mm-hmm.
They all collapsed for some reason. That is exactly what they have done. So I think if counties want to do something and we want to work towards that, we need to remap our disease-free zone. In many counties, I think they are there for many years. It has worked, and we need to rework them. In Botswana, again, also what they have done, they also have another scheme. They call it direct cattle purchase scheme, which is they prepay the pastoralist, they buy animal in advance, which is branded, fatten using the fund. So basically, you are giving someone money to fatten the animal and put for you in a situation or the body condition you want. So these two schemes actually improve the quality of the animal, but then also predictability of the inputs.
Right.
Actually give them the potential for the, for the market in terms of income, in terms of prices, and the uniformity of animals that meet the market condition that's required.
Right.
So there are many cases where we could actually borrow if you want to work back to say, how do we meet this, export market?
Right.
Few have done,
Right.
but we have basically less than maybe 2% of the potential within Kenya to enter a good market in goats. I think in the Middle East market, in Egypt, in Congo for the big goats. There are many which are there, but we haven't taken systematic, structured learning approach to entry to international market. And I think that is something we need to rework. It took a lot of dialogue, consultation, and I think we have done very well in terms of producing guidelines for standards. Kenya Bureau of Standards have actually standard for slaughtering, for fattening. They have so many standards, very small documents that actually meet those international standards, but I don't think they are fully operationalized to make sure that we respond to this and actually get money. If you get premium money, people will start producing for that market. Why not?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So instead of selling 5 goats, I could sell 1 goat and get the same money.
Yeah.
So
brilliant. This is fascinating discussion, Guyo, and I'm sure we'll come back to it again. And once again, thank you for your time. And let's keep on talking, because there's a great deal that needs to be unpacked in the pastoralist space, that a lot of it, be it because of the lack of data that informs the policy that informs the way it's covered in the media, and then overall, we miss on nuances and complexities. And again, something that can benefit the overall national GDP and improve the livelihood. Thank you so much, and have a nice weekend, and let's talk again.
Okay, thank you so much. I think let's sustain the conversation. We can have very specific conversation, a specific aspect, so that people get into more context, more understanding, and actually try to do something. I think this is very useful. I think you're starting a very important conversation that will actually propel the thinking around this topic, which many people don't want to really spend a lot of time to grapple with these challenges around it. And I think it's very important to sustain the conversation. And thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Guyo. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
Thank you.